This is an explainer video on preparing for the Agile winter. There are two reasons why independent US Agile coaches should consider reducing their equity exposure. First, their incomes are highly volatile, so that's risk. And number two, we have not experienced a significant economic downturn or stock market drop in a decade. And that's, of course, when 99% of all Agile coaches started their careers. So there may be Agile coaches who experienced the global financial crisis in 2008-9, but it's extremely unlikely that they were Agile coaches during that period of time because the field more or less didn't exist. So these are two reasons why independent US Agile coaches should consider reducing their equity exposure in their discretionary portfolio, like their retirement funds. So let's look at each of these in turn. So standard personal finance assumes a constant income, constant savings, and constant expenses during retirement. So this is a typical retirement planner from Vanguard, which is a very well-regarded firm. But as you can see, it asks you, how much money do you make per year? So every year between now and retirement. There's no ability to account for income volatility. This is my monthly income. It's published in the book Agile Coaching. And as you can see, it's anything but constant. Right? In fact, it was negative for over 10% of the time and actually negative during the entire calendar year. And so the assumption that the income of US independent Agile coaches is constant is an assumption that's going to be violated in almost every case. Just standard personal finance is not geared towards people that have 3 to 6 month gigs. It's geared towards full-time employees in very long-running jobs and careers. So this fact that people with volatile income should reduce their equity exposure is not well understood in retail personal finance, as the retirement calculator shows. However, academics do understand it. And so here's an award-winning paper called No Portfolio is an Island, and it won a Graham and Dodd Award in 2015. And so what they say is that optimal equity allocation decreases with age. So that's obvious, that's what everyone knows. As you get closer and closer to retirement, you should reduce the amount of money that you put into equities and increase the amount that you put into cash and low risk investments. But it also declines with riskier employment. And that's what I'm talking about here. Because our employment is riskier as independent Agile coaches, when we have the choice in our retirement funds, for example, we should invest less in high-risk stocks and more in low-risk bonds, cash. It is typically recommended for someone with as many years as we have until retirement and with our income. And this is just not taken into account in the typical retirement calculations or personal finance recommendations. So here's another article, another academic article that notes that a worker who experiences a 33% increase in income volatility decreases the risky share by 4.4 percentage points. So this actually looks at what people actually do in the market, right, with their actual funds. So higher the income volatility, the less they put in the risky part of their portfolio. So the reason number one for US independent Agile coaches to reduce equity exposure is that their income volatility is high. So a zigzag portfolio is the best. So when one part of the portfolio is zigging, your income, the other part, the discretionary investments, should be zagging. And so another way of saying this is that for people who have steady long-term jobs, their income acts like the returns of a bond portfolio. And so it makes sense to take their discretionary money and put it in stocks. But for independent Agile coaches, it's the reverse. Our income acts like the stock market, and so our discretionary investments should be in bonds or low volatility investments. And so I want to note that this is not market timing. This is not tactical asset allocation. This is strategic asset allocation based on an understanding of the total portfolio, and in particular, having this insight that since our incomes are volatile, our investments should be low volatility. So reason number two for US independent Agile coaches to reduce equity exposure is that the US has experienced a triple boom in the last decade since the last global financial crisis. So first, we've had positive economic growth. We haven't had a recession, obviously, in the last decade. The second is that the stock market has not been in a bear market. There hasn't been any 20% 50% drop in the stock market, which is the definition of a bear market stock market. And then tech stocks have actually outperformed the broad market. That's the triple boom. And tech stocks matter because many agile coaches work at tech companies. So let's just look at the data. So no recessions since this gray area, which is the 2008-2009 global financial crisis, and only a few quarters that were down. So a recession is defined as 2 negative quarters of GDP growth. So we haven't had that for 10 years. And the agile market was created essentially during those 10 years. Right? 10 years ago, there was almost no one who was an agile coach. So almost no one has experienced a recession as an agile coach. So we just don't know what's going to happen to the market. There's uncertainty. And here's the stock market returns. In blue is the S&P 500. In red is the NASDAQ tech-heavy NASDAQ. And so stock market, the blue line has not had a 20% down period. It hasn't had any bear market. And the NASDAQ has actually outperformed. Right? So another way of saying this is that if you're an independent agile coach in the US and you are not crushing it, you should probably think about what you're doing, because we've had literally the best possible situation for independent agile coaches in the last 10 years. And so the fact that we've been in this triple boom means that we have no empirical data about what happens to the US independent agile coaching market during a recession or a bear market. So there's uncertainty. So just to summarize, number one, there's income volatility, so there's risk. And number two, there's uncertainty because we've never seen a recession or a bear market. And so what this suggests is that we should reduce our equity exposure in the discretionary part of our portfolios, right, our retirement funds. And so here's some of the things that I've done. I put almost all of my discretionary capital in high yield savings or short-term bond funds. I'm actively seeking side hustles to reduce the volatility of my income, and I've strengthened relationships. So my name is Michael Della Matta. I'm an agile coach in San Francisco. My website is hearthealthyscrum.com. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn or via email.